All right. Hi, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I see some of you still trickling toward your seats, getting settled. Um, but I want to welcome you all to our annual Community Engagement Showcase. This is our annual end cap to our Community Engagement Forum um, series, which we run quarterly. So we see many of you quarterly on Zoom, but we are really thrilled to have everyone here in person and have the opportunity for many of our university partners and our community partners to share some space and share the work that you are all doing together, either currently or hopefully in the future. I will just start us off with a couple of opening announcements. First, our CCTSI continues to provide community engagement consultations. So if you have a spark of an idea today and need some guidance or expert advice, please feel free to reach out. Let's see if I can get slides going forward. There we go. I wanted to share a little announcement about the CCTSI Community Engagement Pilot Grants. I know a round of these is currently under review, and it looks like the next cycle, the RFA will be released in November. So keep your eyes open for the next cycle of these. These are wonderful small grants to support either partnership development or pilot grants for community and academic partners who are working together. Up next, our community immersion training applications for this year are closed, correct? But they start next week. But the next cycle of that will open in February. So keep your eyes open for that if you are interested in learning about community-based participatory research and potential community partners. If you are interested in seeing any of the forums that we have put on, especially over the last year, leading up to this presentation today and our event, those are all available on our website. And then I've talked a little bit about our CCTSI programs, but I want to share for any of you who are not familiar what Accords is. We co-host this series with CCTSI's Community Engagement Core, and we are a little bit of a one-stop shop for the pragmatic science side of your work. So really providing methodological support as well as mentorship and training and educational opportunities like our community engagements forum series, as well as several workshops and talks throughout the year. And our last event of the year in our educational space will be our Colorado Pragmatic Research and Health Conference, which is in about a month. And we would love to see many of you there. We'll actually be here in this room May 20th and 21st, and you can learn more about that at coppercon.com. All right. I am going to hand over the mic to my partner in crime here, Don Neese, to introduce our speakers today.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. So for those of you that are new to this, just to let you know, this is a collaboration and a partnership between our CCTSI Community Engagement Core and Accords. And we're really thankful to have that partnership. And I also want to give a shout out to our planning group, which includes community advisors. So if you're part of that, would you please stand up so we can recognize you? So Mary Beth and Antonio are very patient and, but they push us, which is good, which is really good. So we're going to kick things off today with a keynote presentation that's going to be jointly provided to us by Nina Wallerstein and Charmant Musato. And as you'll see here, some of the backdrop context for this is work that we've been doing as part of Dr. Wallerstein's E Squared Plus that comes through PCORI as a Science of Engagement Award. And that's working across multiple institutions. And you'll hear more about that. But I first want to introduce our two speakers. And I'm going to start with Charmant. Charmant is a guy that actually, I think, if I'm right, like 6, maybe 7 years ago, Charmant came up to me after an in-person event like this and chatted me up, wanted to get engaged. And here we are today. Charmant brings a background in pharmaceutical research. He worked in industry for a number of years, and has become a member of our PAC Council, which is our governing body of our Community Engagement Corps at CCTSI. And Charmant also leads a couple of community-based organizations that are really focused to promote community-driven, community-led research in the communities that he works with and serves and is a part of. So we're really excited to have Charmant with us today. Dr. Nina Wallerstein is, I would say, a giant in the world of community-based participatory research, has authored textbooks, has led incredible research on this work. She comes to us from the University of New Mexico. I've had the privilege and pleasure of working with Nina on a variety of things over the past few years, and she's been up to facilitate our PAC Council retreat and worked with us across many different projects. She's been doing this work for over 25 years, involved in empowerment, popular education, participatory research with youth, women, tribes, community building efforts, has had funding from the CDC, NIH, PCORI, and is just a fantastic partner. And I know you'll enjoy both Dr. Wallerstein's and Dr. Masada's comments. So without further ado, I'm going to invite them to the podium. And just also want to mention, we have folks joining us on Zoom, so they will also be able to be a part of the questions and conversations after the presentation.
Thank you, Don. So when I was thinking of coming up here, I said, well, it obviously had to be with the community partner. So I'm really pleased that Dr. Musata, Charmant, and I can do this together. So we're going to go back and forth. And this is our title: How Could Institutions Be Accountable and Adaptable as Communities Help Shape Research Agendas? And so I'm going to give a really quick, who am I? I really believe that if you do community-engaged research, you have to be who you are and can't pretend to be somebody else. I am an academic. I live in a community, but I am an academic. I have to accept that and be that. I bring the baggage of the university with me. But also, so we're going to talk a little bit about where we come from. I'm going to then present a little bit of history of Engage for Equity Plus, E² Plus. We had to change the name under the current national context to E² Plus, or Evidence for Engagement, but we love to still call it Engage for Equity, so we'll do it here. It's Engage for Equity. And then kind of the challenges that we all face across the country and all face in our own communities in doing community engagement, and then kind of talk about transformation. What is transformation? How do we make change? Some of the tensions we live with. And a new opportunity has arisen with E² Plus working with Colorado PACT with CCTSI, called the Community-Led Research Hub, which we're going to hear more about, and then talk about sort of implications for thinking about that opportunity. So I'm Nina Wallerstein. I was born in Kansas, but I basically thought of myself always as a New York Jew. My family members were immigrants from Russia and Germany. But I grew up with privilege, with a middle-class environment, with knowing that I was going to be going to college, that I had resources to do that. In the 60s, participating in a lot of social justice movements. And then as I moved into academia, even though it took me quite a long time, my parents were very disturbed that it took 5 years in between my bachelor's and then 5 years between my master's and my doctorate. They didn't get it. They were both academics, actually. I, though, had learned very early about Paulo Freire from Brazil, a liberatory educator, liberatory revolutionary thinker, and movement person working with social movements. And I brought that to the research and started working with healthy communities. I started working with, in my own first positions at the University of New Mexico with tribal partners since the 1980s, actually. I've been working with tribal partners. And I kind of been developing my whole CBPR approach as a baby CBPR researcher with the tribal partners who really taught me about approvals, tribal sovereignty, governance, data justice, all these ethical responsibilities when we work with communities that should be, of course, followed with every community we work with. And then I'll talk about my own work in Engage for Equity with looking at what makes for partnering processes. I just wanted to give one, this is kind of a long-term work that I've worked with tribal partners called the Family Listening Project, where they developed their own culture-centered intergenerational program, a dinner-based program, trying to work with teachings of culture and language from elders to 10 and 12-year-olds through the parents. And it's been an ongoing effort with a lot of different actually grants, but even when we don't have grants, we continue working together. And that's the beauty of when you really can do this work. So I'm, if there are questions on that later, I'll answer them. I'm going to turn to my colleague here.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Don. It is an honor to be here this morning with you. As Don said, a giant. It's an honor for me to be here. Before we begin, my name is Sharma Musara. I'm originally from the Congo, the Republic of the Congo. And before we begin, I wanted to kind of give you an idea of how do I see the world by sharing some worldviews that shaped my life. Although I come to this discussion as someone who has worked in science, in pharmaceutical research and clinical research, and I also coming here as someone who's long before I entered the research space, my worldview was shaped by a lot of things. The first view is fishing. Through my dad, who's a fisherman, I learned that provision for the family and the community. I learned about responsibilities of being a member of the community, not only of the community, but also about the family. And I also learned that one can never survive alone. We all are dependent within our community, we depend on others. The second worldview that shaped my life I want to share is of a traditional healing through my grandfather. I learned from my grandfather that care is not only technical knowledge, it's also about the dignity, it's also about the respect for the person, it's also about community value. And with that, I also learned that being a member of the community, you have to provide a bit of a service, but taking into consideration the context of the person you're helping or the community where they live. The third worldview is through a main political leader from Africa, Nelson Mandela. He embraced the concept of Ubuntu. It's an African philosophy which says that I am because you are. Through Ubuntu, I also learned that leadership comes with responsibility. And with the leadership, comes that responsibility. The main responsibility as a community member is to understand that one well-being of one member is interconnected to the well-being of other members of community or the society. Finally, the last worldview is of science and research, which the reason brought me, I'm here in America. I learned through research that evidence, it is part of research that we create. The research creates knowledge. That knowledge has to be tested and has to be applied for the benefit of the humanity. In those worldview, I wanted to share them with you because they help me to see people through communities, people through their relationships, and people through the network of communities that they navigate through their lives. So that's how I come to see the work of community engagement. That's what drives, given the lenses through which I see this work.
Okay. So just to give a kind of overview of where E Squared Plus came from, where I started working with Anschutz here. Before that, we had what we were calling Engage for Equity, E Squared. 3 NIH awards are in the pink, and then the Engage for Equity Plus, which is what we're into now, are in the blue. But the 3 NIH awards were really trying to address this question of what does it mean to do community engaged practice? Is it just walking onto the community and to a neighborhood association, into a school, into a homeless shelter and say, I'm here, I have a research question, I want to work with you? That is not good practice, I just have to say. What are the best practices? So we took 3 different NIH cycles to try and develop best practices or understanding of what people were doing all over the country. What people are doing, what are the best practices? We developed a model, we developed measures, instruments to identify these best practices. I actually had the opportunity to survey 400 partnerships around the country, federally funded, all different health issues, from domestic violence to substance abuse to mental health to environmental justice issues, but all different kinds of health issues, trying to understand what are best practices that lead to outcomes. And then we found many. But we realized that isn't enough. It isn't enough for people to really struggle individually to do good work on their own with community partners. But what do institutions, academic health centers, universities need to do to better support the work? That's what we had to change. So we started working in our first PCORI Award. As Don says, we're working now with our second PCORI Award, the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute with Anschutz. But the first one, we started working to test some of our E Squared strategies. And one of the key strategies, I went to dinner last night with people that I wanted just to mention now, is that, many of us think it's just building good, trusting relationships. It's showing up, it's doing a good job, being a good person, being flexible, because things change constantly when you work with communities, things change, being flexible, doing good relationships. To me, that's one side. The other side is building the structures that will support those relationships, building the structures of co-governance. Who's making the decisions in any research project? Is it the academic or is it together? Or maybe it's a community decision that you're listening to. Where are the decisions being made? Who has the power to make decisions? So the structures of governance matter. And then the second structure that matters is money. Who has the money? Who can make the decisions on the money? That's a really big one. And so we're used to at the university getting the grants and getting the money, but we need to be able to distribute the money out. And I know that there's a very big effort here to do that and in many places around the country. But I just wanted to say I became very aware in the first 3 NIH grants that it isn't just relationships, it's also structures. And that's what we took to E Squared Plus. We said, what are the policies, practices, structures at universities, at academic health centers that will support this work better, that will make a difference to really build community leadership. Our outcome in our PCORI award, I think this is why we got the grant or award, is patient community leadership in research, not shared leadership in research. That's our, it's an outcome, it's aspirational, but that's it. So here it is what we're working with. We're working with 8 universities. We started working with a first cohort of in Kansas, San Antonio, University of Colorado, Anschutz, and Penn State. Now we started adding another 4, Virginia Commonwealth, Arkansas, my own university, University of New Mexico, and also University of Iowa. So we're working here with Champion team of half community members, half academics. There are people in this room that are part of this Champion team. We're working also with what we call a PCAG. That's our name for Patient Community Action Group. So we just call it the PCAG and people get used to it. Charmant is a member here of the PCAG and others in the room as well. And we're saying that these 2 groups are going to shape ideas for change at Anschutz. And then we're trying to learn from all 8 institutions. What do we know? What's different in Iowa? What's similar in Iowa? What's different at UNM? What's similar? Because we're all facing the same tensions, but we also have differences because the context is different. It could be a blue state, a red state, a purple state. It can be a university that's more supportive of and has a longer trajectory. Anschutz has a very long, solid trajectory of, it was a pleasure for me to start working with Anschutz. I came here a couple years ago and, as Don said, facilitated a pact. And oh, it was such a fabulous meeting that I said when we were thinking of this PCORI award, I want to keep working with you guys. Will you work with me? So I invited Don and Montel to kind of join in on this grant. The challenges, though, are many. And Charmant, oh, you want me to do this?
You can start.
Okay. Well, academic timelines are different. You got to follow this scope of work. You got to get the grant in. You got to write your reports. You got to recruit your people that you're recruiting into the study. And we have our own priorities, but which are maybe different and are definitely different with community lived priorities. And the challenge, I want to go back to power, and we were talking about this last night, we often ask communities to get recruited into our trials or participate with us. But again, we don't build the co-governance of co-decision making as well as we could. Many of us try and we do it well, but we can continue to work on this. Do you want me to keep going? Or ethic? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Charmant.
So from the community perspective, when I listen to a colleague like Nina speaking, the question that comes to my mind is, what does all that mean for me, a community member? What does it mean for people who are working within communities and doing community work? So what I see is that communities and academic partners enter into partnerships speaking the same language, words, community engagement, but they do mean different things. They enter that partnership being in 2 parallel worlds. When the researcher comes to a community, they speak in terms of timelines of the projects, deadlines, goals, aims, and other things. Community members, when they come to a partnership, they're looking at the realities of their communities. They're looking at the need and challenges of their communities. And so this way of looking at the things, again, going to worldview, is they go in parallel, talking about partnership, but speaking 2 different languages, which mean different things. The community want to know what are our priorities in this project. They don't align with the researchers' timelines and goals. And that creates tensions that is hard to address. And also communities find that they come to this partnership with being consulted but with no influence, with no power in decision making. And usually they go by what the researchers' projects has defined as timelines. But as you know, communities are not a site for recruitment. They're not pools where we go collect data and recruit. Communities are complex systems where people live their lives. There are a lot of things going on. Therefore, you have to have a way to enter the community, having to in mind their needs, their priorities. A partnership requires you to bring something to the table that will help me, and I bring something to the table that will help you. We can work together. So the importance of this slide here is that being in two parallel worlds, it creates tension about power sharing. It creates tension about the time, how we should do the project. Researchers want something fast and quick, meet the deadline, write the result, and publish. But that's not the goal for community members. There are other things.
So two other complementary thoughts to my colleague here, that the idea of ethics in a university is very different than an idea of ethics. And again, from my experience in tribal communities, working with tribal partners and tribal IRBs add a whole section that we don't have at the university. We have harm benefit to an individual. Tribal partners add, what are you going to do to benefit my community? How are you going to educate the results and bring the results back to my community? How are you going to bring technical assistance back to this community from the results? And so it's a very different IRB. I work in one project right now, the Family Listing Project, with 3 IRBs, 2 tribal IRBs, Southwest Tribal IRB, Navajo Nation IRB, University IRB, and 6 tribal councils who also approve this study. That's 9 approval bodies for a NIH grant. So just to say, if you're going to do this work, you got to know what that means. But how do we bring that ethical stance of, and then the long-term trust building and the knowledge. The second point is that we often say, well, the communities have values and beliefs and lived experience, and academics have knowledge. I hate that. Communities have knowledge. So how do we just have 2 knowledges that we bring together? One isn't beliefs, one is non-beliefs. We also all have beliefs, but we also all have knowledges. So just to add that, we wanted to do one slide also now of kind of our collaborative process. I think we share with Anschutz here a shared goal to strengthen E²+, to strengthen patient community voice and leadership in the whole ecosystem. I've seen it in the Anschutz folks I've had the pleasure of working with. There is the PACT, and there is E² that I've already talked about. Do you want to say a few words on the PACT, or do you want to just, do people know about the PACT?
I think they do, but I can share a little bit about, although I mentioned the tensions, but I have a hope in, for the past 3 years, I've been a member of the PACT. I'm encouraged by the work that the PACT is doing by creating a space where community members are beginning to share their voices and bring ethical concerns to the platform that the PACT and CCTS has created. And that's I look to seeing more places like that in academic institutions, because that's what it's truly needed. I want to go back a little bit to the aspect of knowledge. I was in an event with one community organization where a member asked me and said, if the academic institutions believe that they own knowledge, they are the only one who can create knowledge, why do they come to us, the communities? And I was like, that's communities have knowledge. There's existing knowledge in the communities. They survive our systems. They have way of doing things. That's why we are able to go and collect data, because they have some knowledge of how the system works. And those are things that, as the institution, have to begin to be aware of, that working with communities, it's not only the relationships and then go and tap into a community advisory board and come out. Communities are looking for long-term relationships where you become partners in addressing their priorities, or where you can become a partner in working with them on a long-term relationship through which you have earned their trust. Trust has to be sustained through accountability, and that requires time for you to be able to do that and demonstrate that. And those are the things I want to add.
Okay. So you can see that the CCTSI and the PACT, we have the date, I hope it's correct, starting in 2008. We came in E Squared Plus in 2024. So there was already a long history of an engaged process here with community members and academics working together to make decisions to strengthen community engagement, to strengthen pilot programs, to strengthen all of the education activities that Sarah mentioned earlier. So we came into a long-term structure. What we added were some very specific teams, champion team, as I said, half community, half patients, half academics, and the patient community action group just by itself thinking themselves, what additional things would strengthen Anschutz, especially as we got here in this national environment where universities are losing money, and communities are being attacked and suffering. What does it take to maintain our priorities to community? What does it take for universities to do that? We also collected data, and that we collected survey data, institutional survey data on what current principles, practices exist, what are the norms, how much is community engagement valued. And we collected focus groups, and I got a chance to interview leadership here at this institution, at the Academic Health Center, kind of getting perspectives, and presented the data back. And this year we kind of came together. That was the first year. The second year, we have been working with one really group that's formed a community engagement group related to the creation of a community-led research hub. And the other is kind of a coming together of academics thinking about how to keep the strength going at the institution across the Academic Health Center. So how do we do it in E Squared Plus? I'm just going to run through a few things really quickly. We started with the CBPR model, saying every context is different. Every university that we're working with is different. Every community state is different. But how are they developing their partnering practices? You all developed the PACT in 2008 as a really intensive partnering structure, which is pretty incredible, I just have to say, from watching across the country. You then have developed a lot of your own intervention, educational programs, pilot grants, all of this red box of actions. You built it from your partnership, from the PACT, and maybe from input from leadership, et cetera, towards your own view of health and social justice outcomes. This is like a pathway model. How do you start? You start thinking about context. You ask yourself how and with whom you're partnering. You then use the partnership for the decisions around the actions. And then the actions, of course, are leading to the outcomes you want. So we use this structurally to look at the whole institution as well. I did want to say and honor that this model, many of you may know, does exist now from the National Academy of Medicine. It's being floated around the country a lot. I think they're complementary models. This is a model based on outcomes, really. A set of principles in the center in the green, and then strengthened partnership and alliances as a set of outcomes. Expanded knowledge is a set of outcomes. Expanded improved health and healthcare processes and policies as outcomes, and thriving communities as outcomes. So I think our CBPR model is a process pathway model. This is an outcome-based model. I think they can help each other. We also work in E Squared Plus, this idea of two-eyed seeing. This from a Mi'kmaq elder from First Nations Nova Scotia, Ituap Monk. of where the community ways of knowing are braided with Western ways of knowing. And that's a kind of, how do we braid community and academics? We do this ongoing listening, dialogue, action, and we use our model to think, this is our actual kind of one slide of what we have. The Academic Health Center with communities and patients is Anschutz here. University of New Mexico is on the other side. We're working together, but again, with 8 institutions. We have these PCAGs and the champion teams. We had a set of workshops in the first year for those who weren't involved, didn't know. And we are really working on this. Now we're in the center box where it says working groups. That's where we are right now with E²+ in Colorado and with 4 other institutions. In the first workshop, we did a whole context setting, River of Life. I don't know who was in the room remembers this creation. Someone put Barack Obama there, but you created it yourself. This was your workshop of your history of engagement. Of course, we had to do it online, so that's why all of these sticky notes. We created data sharing action briefs based on our mixed methods data to provide opportunities both in Spanish and in English for the PCAG, but in English for the champion team. This was, people took this survey and we wanted to give the data back in a way of actions. And, you know, there's some potential actions here, and you can get copies of all these slides too, to send out. We then kind of in workshop 2, we created a working group and on what are the action, and so we did action planning, and that's where this idea surfaced of what is a community research hub. So we, in the first year of E²+, we're doing this with all the institutions. We went through these workshops, we collected data, and we're trying to make it useful for ideas of what are the structures that could be strengthened here that would need support from the institution and the community-led research hub Charmant's going to talk about. But we wanted to also kind of ground it a little bit in this tension of who is shaping and owning the research from a paternalism point of view versus recognition of community knowledge and benefit point of view. And we struggle with this because, you know, we do want to provide protection, but who is it protecting? Is it protecting the university? Or, you know, and that's kind of our more paternalistic side. Or are we really protecting those who we are trying to serve and work with as partners? If you use the word partner, it's very different than if you use the word client, consumer, patient. Partner makes a difference. So that's the word I try and use a lot. So please, Charmant, you want to add to this conversation?
Yes, there was one slide that Nina shared about the model, CBP model. I like that. Can you go back to,
Oh,
I think
sure.
it's 10.
Oh, it's 10?
I think. Yes, this.
Go come to the microphone.
This, yes, okay. This slide, I like it because it's one way to help us see the community through the complexity of things. It's not just about going through one relationships, but you can see the different contexts that the community have or exist in communities, and also the complexity in building or creating partnerships. Also, when it comes to the intervention and the outcomes, who measures outcomes? How do we measure the impact of those outcomes? Is it what the institution or the academic or the researcher present as an outcome of their work with the communities? Is that good enough? Does it represent the same outcomes that community members expected from that work, or are they different?
So we have a few more,
Yes.
10 minutes.
Okay.
So why don't we go right to theirs?
Oh, but there's one more.
Here. Let's just, this one?
Oh, yeah.
No, why don't you go
This
ahead?
one. So the first one.
This one?
Yes.
Okay, but we should go fast.
Yes. Here the tensions, like we said, protections. Who define what protection is? Is it the institution again? who defines participant protection, institution protection, the researcher protection is guaranteed within the institutional ethics. But how about the protection of the community? How about the protection of the harm done to the community by previous research projects? Who is accountable for that? Who is supposed to bring those things up?
So this is leading then to the goal of this PCAG, which is turned into an organizing group for the community, the idea of a community-led research hub. CLRH. We have to come up with, I don't know, it's kind of hard to roll off the tongue, but.
Yes, the idea here is not to define a final structure, but it's a conceptual model to say that, imagine if communities have also a way to have an infrastructure to add value to what researchers or academic institutions do through a community-led research hub. How much of the value would come from that? What will be the gain that the institution will get out of that? And what will be the gains that the communities will get out of such a collaboration and such infrastructure? Community engagement research requires an infrastructure. For now, that's not existing, be it on the community side or on the institution side. But to be able to do that, communities and institutions have to come together and find ways of working collaboratively in order to put structures in place and infrastructure that facilitate community engaged research. And therefore, the model we're trying to put here is, I'm speaking now to community members who are here present, is that having community be part of that effort, what it does, it adds community leadership, community ownership into the research effort, so that community also can define the agendas of the research being done with the community people. Community can define also the value, because when the research is looked at on one side, the value of the communities is not upfront. So the community-led research hub will be that place, an ideal place where we can work together to bring all those ethical concerns and all those community values, all the benefits that the research or that community member expect research to address or to bring to their communities. And so our goal is we are working and looking for community members who are really into the research, participating into research, building a coalition of community partners here in Colorado to work together with the institution, the CU General Campus, to be able to facilitate that collaboration and also be like a bridge, operational bridge, to bring the research into the communities, because the research institution by themselves cannot do certain things in communities. They need to work with the communities to be able to create such operations. And therefore, if a space like a community-led research hub will play that role.
And I think one of the discussions that's under just starting is kind of the relationship between the really strong structure of the pact with this potential new opportunity. We understand there are other CABs like in the San Luis Valley that are multi-research. They're not just like often we develop as researchers a CAB that's for a single project. This is different, like maybe what exists in San Luis Valley, where this would be for multiple projects, for multiple investigators to come get feedback, for multiple ideas to come from the community. So it's not just based on one grant or one research opportunity, and that's the big change. So summary, we have two summary slides, and then we can open it up.
Yes, in summary, if you have to walk away with one thing today, just to remember, communities are not site or recruitment pools where we just go and plug in people and participate. They are systems, and community hold, they are knowledge holders. They do they can define their own outcomes on the research. And also, from point of view of ethics, communities know how to protect the people. They have learned from the past, from history, what type of research projects have harmed them. They remember those things. And therefore, so it's how do we work with them, learning from those lived experiences to be able to empower the research effort that the institution is doing so that communities benefit from it and institution partners also benefit from it.
So we know we're in a challenging time. We're still across E²+ working with these 8 institutions. We worked with 3 before. So we've worked with 11 universities to try and understand what are efforts that these universities are trying to do to strengthen their community engagement structures and whole ecosystems. And so this is an ongoing process. You know, this PCORI Grant Award is 3 years, but we continue to do the work together. We've just published, and again, this is an academic product. We've just published in the Journal of Clinical Translational Science an entire issue on institutional transformation. So what are people thinking across the country? Just came out. I led this. The first editorial, I led so you could read the first editorial, but then 7 of the 17 articles are actually from the first E² effort. So we can think, we're developing also toolkit tools for communities to think about how you push universities to make change. We're also trying to think of, well, now we have 8 universities together. We're going to bring people together next year from the 8 universities and community partners of these universities to try and say, well, what are we learning here, and how can we still push the field forward, that our institutions need to be more transparent, accountable, share power, and share money, but share the structures. And there's other sites are working on mental health and women's cancer. They're coming from a disease, a health condition, but they're still working on the structures at the university that are supporting research based on community priorities of these 2 issues. New coalitions are being formed in other sites, just like this community-led research hub, across counties that have never worked together before. And that's kind of exciting for us because they're putting pressure then on the institution to listen to them more closely, especially related to urban-rural challenges where, you know, there's a lot of resources in the urban. So we're seeing these universities, some of them are tackling this. How do we do community forums in the rural areas? I'm sure we all do it. And then finally, 2 days before this session, I got an email from a colleague, Isabel Duron, who is one of our community governing board members. She leads the Latino Cancer Institute in California, and she wrote me this. So I felt I had to end with this. You can't do community engagement on a deadline because trust cannot go on a Gantt chart.
I want to add something.
Okay, and then thanks to all of our partners, and I'll leave it with my colleague to end here.
No, on the first slide.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
I love this slide, and I want to add something. To me, it felt like, from a community perspective, felt like it was halfway. You can do community engagement on deadline. I would add, you can't do community engagement on a demand. Because Community engagement requires trust. Trust has to be built through relationships. It has to be earned, and trust needs to be sustained through accountability. And so I felt like, yes, not on deadline, but also not on demand. Because when you hear people, I need people, 10 people to participate in my study. No. So I love that slide and want to make that comment. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Nina.
So we also at University of New Mexico, I know there's a lot of training here, but we do a once a year institute, a CBPR institute. It is in June if anyone is interested. Sarah actually has flyers right there. If you can't come this year, we're on our 17th year this year. We've had over 700 people participate from around the country, from UNM, and internationally people come. I have people coming from Brazil and Nicaragua this year. So it's a very intriguing kind of set of opportunities, and you're always welcome to think of coming. So thank you. I know we're going to be heading into networking tables, which are very important because people need that chance. Maybe we have time for 1 or 2 or 3 questions or thoughts.
I'm here for Antonio to move around.
It's the second one.
We have our community partners from our planning committee helping us with Q&A today. So Antonio, I'll let you take over here.
Do we have 2 mics? Okay.
Here you go, Marianne.
So Dr. Neese asked us committee members if we would moderate here. And he said to try to find our inner best Phil Donahue. So I don't know if I can really meet that standard, but I'll try. So, and I think the way we're supposed to start this is, I think we're supposed to start this by asking our own questions of the committee, of you two. And my question is, how many know where the San Luis Valley is here in this? Okay, quite a few of you do. Okay, the San Luis Valley is, like somebody asked last night when we were eating, where is the San Luis Valley? Well, like also somebody else asked, where's Fort Collins? Greeley. And I said it's by Wyoming. Well, San Luis Valley is by New Mexico. And in fact, at one time it was part of New Mexico. So I guess we're sort of cut into that. The San Luis Valley is about 46,000 people, not very many people, 8,100 square miles. So it's a lot of sparse land, very few people. And we've done a lot of research in the valley. My question to you guys is, for example, in the San Luis Valley, agriculture is really the predominant economic source in the valley. Water is very important. For a long time, water had been sought by people in Denver, Colorado Springs, everywhere else, and it's a very low supply. So the people in the valley became very skeptical about people coming from Denver to steal our water, buy our water or whatever. Well, it's kind of the same way with research. People come to the valley to do a lot of research, and then what do the people in the valley get back from it? So my question, and you had a point there on one of your slides, as that part of partnership is long-term partnership determines the trust that you have with the people. So how do you develop that trust with people in small communities, rural communities that are really in need of a lot of help for healthcare and research?
That's a good question, Antonio. That's a good question, and that's why it is important to find ways to see people and communities in the areas where they live. the way people feel that the research is coming here, taking the data, is because they don't feel part of it. They don't feel that the impact of that research, the outcomes of that research, do not improve the quality of the lives of the people in that area. The meaning to establish it that it is this work here, it is for the benefits of this community. How do we work with you to create that benefits or those benefits? The people of the communities will no longer see you as someone who come and I'll call it, steal the data and then go, but they will see you as a true partner to work together. And that's how you begin to establish those partnerships. But it also requires you, before doing that, building relationships, and through those relationships, learning more about the communities and identifying what are their priority needs and what is your research, what is your meaning, the importance of research to address those priority needs of that community. And I think that will be the best way to build those partnerships.
And I think that,
Oh, just to add, Mary Northridge, who was the editor many years ago of the Journal of American Public Health, Journal of Public Health, what was it called? American Journal of Public Health, that's it, wrote a beautiful little essay years ago, and she said, you only need 3 things to do community engagement. She said, show up, go there. Listen, that was the second, and have values of social justice. I would add now, based on all of this long-term work that I've done, create a co-governance agreement document that says, how are you going to publish together? How are you going to return the data to the community? I work with tribes. They own the data. We return the data to them. We have shared publishing. I have never published an article without tribal co-authors, never since the 80s in terms of working with my tribal partners. So you build that into agreements, and that also provides the structure for this long-term relationship building, because people don't get so anxious about it, and they believe, and then they'll hopefully know when somebody else comes into the community and says, I want to do research with you, they'll say, where's your agreement? You know, you can't just come in here. I know that you can provide me with the data back. So do you agree to do that? So in fact, they don't feel extracted from, because hopefully it's an agreement that you create together. Yeah.
and I'm glad you brought up the show up. The University of Colorado Anschutz and Dr. Neese and Jen here are just some representatives. They've shown up in the San Luis Valley whenever we needed them to be there for us. They've shown up, so I think they're very much appreciated. The only bad thing is a lot of time other institutions, other universities want to do research, but you don't know whether to have that trust factor with them.
So I do know that now, so there are community boards that are preventing people from coming in. They're saying you can't do the research here. So that happened in Flint, Michigan after the lead crisis. They don't allow just any researchers to come in. They decide. Navajo Nation, I've been at the Navajo Nation IRB board when they told a whole group from North Carolina, nope. And they had flown out to Window Rock. It's not even close to an airport, to the Navajo Nation IRB to get their blessing. And they were told no. So it can happen if a community decides that that's important to figure that out.
I'd like to welcome questions from the audience. I have one related to the IRB process, and then a specific example of how, I don't know if it's governance, I don't know what flexibility and so forth, but I want to defer to your questions first.
I don't need to stand up, do I? Do I need to stand up?
Whatever.
Okay. Okay. Hello. My name is Shonda, and I'm with the Colorado Department of Public Health, and it's good to see you. Shamud, we worked together when you were with Clinical Trust for the Champions of Vaccine Equity program that I lead, and I do community outreach. I'm so happy to be here today and just really to listen to your presentation. I think it's been really wonderful and insightful. So thank you for sharing that. As you know, working in the space with building partnerships, the big key here is really building relationships. And during the COVID pandemic, when we worked together on different task force and what have you, a lot of things came up with working with communities about distrust, communities that have been historically harmed with whether it was Tuskegee airmen testing and that whole thing that happened, and many others, so numerous. And one thing that I found really important with the building relationship is really acknowledgement. Like you just can't brass over something that someone said and that was harmed, but you really had to listen intently to really understand their challenges and why. Like, why are they not engaging or not willing to really, have a talk with you? And I think that it takes numerous efforts, perhaps, to, hey, are you willing? Ask the question, ask for permission to continue the dialogue, to have those conversations. Can we meet again? That's what we did, because they didn't want to talk to us. And I said, it's understandable. You don't want to talk to the government. I hear you. Tell me why. How can we really make it better? How can we engage in a more healthy way that's meaningful, that's impactful? And let's see a way that we can give back. And so I want to know from you, like, what challenges you may have faced with disarming the communities, in partnerships, and having those discussions where the walls are up, and how have you disarmed, perhaps, and what type of methods or solutions did you utilize? Thank you.
Shanta, thank you so much. First of all, I want to acknowledge we never had the opportunity to go back to CDPHE and share the impact of the work that we have done in the communities, bringing community members on their own to share that. But it was a wonderful experience. Not only a wonderful experience, but community members kept asking, when are we going to continue this work? But as you know, the funding is no longer there, and projects come and go. They depend on the funding, and community have to find other ways to do the work. The challenges in the community are there, but what struck me the most is the willingness, the desire of the people wanting to be part of that effort of building, working together to see how they can add value to the work that program like at CDPHE does for them, and also for them themselves taking ownership, leadership of the projects that create value for their own communities. That to me, it was humbling, but it's also just wanted to know, help me understand that although the challenges are there, but when people understand the importance, the significance, the value of the work you want to do, they will be part of it and they will embrace it. That's where the trust is. It's a key, not that only trust you go and do it for one-off project and leave, but how do you sustain that effort? And how do you keep going to the communities even when you don't have the money, which we're still doing now, and trying to find ways to develop leadership groups in each of the communities. By the way, we work with 10 African immigrants communities. When I say communities, nationalities, different nationalities. And how do you work with each group separately, taking into consideration their own context, their own belief system, their own lived experiences as immigrants. They're all immigrants, but they don't have all the same challenges. And so, thank you. But yes, we'll talk, and we still need help. There's a lot of work needed to be done in the communities. That's why the value of community-led research hub, where we could be working with people like Antonio, as far as the valley he was describing, that's where the community research hub could play that role of bringing all a coalition of community organization or partners together to be able to bring the voices of community and to work in collaboration with the institutions.
So I think we're going to be moving into our table discussions, but just to say, your question that you asked is one of the hardest, because there are both, no community is monolithic. Every community group you bring together has different interests, different people, different organizations, different histories. Again, in tribal communities, there's a lot of history, centuries of history of clans, et cetera, that you also don't even know as an outsider. So it's kind of like, uh-oh, what am I walking into? But, you know, I try and co-facilitate. So if I need to, we can say, yes, we need to keep working on this. Let's take a break, and one person go. There are disruptors. There are people who are disruptors. You know, so that's also, it's harder to do with disruptors online. If it's in a place, you can talk with them sometimes. But I agree also that sometimes you need to think about the real issue and whether the whole community effort needs a restorative justice type of approach. So there are approaches that can, you have to diffuse what's happening right then, right there. If there's someone gets up who's really angry, and you know, the best way is to agree and say, you know, this has happened. Let's agree that this historical abuse has happened. Let's all agree. And we're still focused on this, but we're going to come back to this. We're not going to let it go. So you just have to kind of find ways, however you all facilitate, to do it, to not, like you say, don't pretend it didn't happen, but also don't let it take over if you can help that, make that happen. And again, it's a skill we all need to figure out how to gain. That is a skill. Facilitation, doing communication research, yes, you need to know research methods. There's a lot of skills related to research methodologies and stuff. There's a lot of skills related to just facilitation and principles and how we do the work together. So thank you. And it looks like we're going to move into tables. Yes.
So much. Thank you so much. I want to thank Nina and Shermont for a wonderful talk and some amazing insights for all of us. I'm going to see. We're gonna switch slide decks in a minute. But what I want to do right now is help us all transition. So we have had a really great, hopefully grounding talk about how we think about our partnerships, how we think about those in the context of our institution, and the responsibilities that we have here at the university and then in partnership with our community. We are really lucky today to have several community partners in the back of the room. And so we're gonna all get up, we're gonna move around, we're gonna transition to having some time to talk and build connection between our university partners and our community partners. And I hope everyone will take this time to meet several new people. Take a minute to go from table to table. If you were here as a partner, take a few minutes to go meet the other partners as well. We don't expect you to like lock yourself behind your table, but take the time to go meet some new people, to hear about the amazing work that some of our community partners are doing. Hopefully, it's also a chance to find some common ground where there might be new partnerships, new collaborations coming out of today. During that time, what you'll see up here on the screen are going to be rotating slides about some of the partners. So if you aren't sure who might be a good connection, feeling a little nervous about who to go talk to first, pay attention to the slides. You'll see some of the people who are back there. I will also assure you, everyone who is here today is kind and friendly and is going to want to talk to you. So you don't need to be nervous. But if you're trying to prioritize a couple of tables or a topic that you're really interested in, we'll have that up there. I would also like to ask each of you to take a couple minutes to do a very brief evaluation. We take these really seriously. Everything that we do for our community forum over the last 2 years has been directly informed by something somebody told us in our evaluation. So take the opportunity to tell us what you want to hear about, but also tell us if we're missing the mark and there's something else that would really benefit you and your work in community partnership. And then lastly, I just want to say another huge thank you to everybody who is a part of making this happen. to our Accord staff, to our CCTSI Community Engagement Corps for their amazing partnership, to Nina and Charmant for bringing amazing insights and expertise today. And I will ask you all to stand up and move around now. Thank you so much. And to our Zoom participants, we are going to close out because the rest of our program is walking and networking, but we hope that you will also take a chance to meet some new partners over the next couple weeks and put what you heard today into practice. Thank you, everyone.